Most men fear loneliness, but the truth is, society fears the man who embraces it. From the moment you step into adulthood, you are trained to depend on others, to seek approval, to blend into the herd, get married, have kids, maintain friendships, fit in. These are the invisible chains society wraps around every man. But the man who rejects them after 40 does more than stand apart. He terrifies the world. Why? Because he is free. Carl Jung understood what modern men have forgotten. Independence is a threat to the collective illusion. A man alone, fully autonomous, exposes the lies society clings to. He demonstrates that happiness does not require approval, that strength does not depend on numbers, and that fulfillment is not measured by conformity. Every man who dares live alone after 40 becomes a silent revolutionary. He embodies a truth that most men are too cowardly to face. Your life is yours alone, and anyone who tries to claim authority over it is not your master. They are an illusion. Society fears him because he cannot be controlled, predicted, or distracted. He is a mirror, reflecting the weaknesses, compromises, and fears that the masses hide behind polite smiles and social rituals. The independent man reminds the world that most of its so-called wisdom is built on lies, that most of its safety is built on obedience, and that most of its comfort is built on illusion. Every great man in history understood this. Socrates drank the hemlock alone. Diogenes wandered the streets, indifferent to judgment. Nietzsche wrote truths that terrified polite society. These men, like the solitary man after 40, were not failures, they were the future incarnate. And today that same truth still terrifies the world. This is not about loneliness. This is about mastery. This is not about isolation. This is about sovereignty. And in the next 40 minutes, you will see why the man who chooses to live alone after 40 is more dangerous, more powerful, and more alive than most men will ever dare to be. Why does society fear the man who lives alone after 40? Because he cannot be controlled. The world functions on predictability, on obedience, on conformity. Governments, corporations, families, and media all thrive on collective compliance. They need men who follow scripts, who chase approval, who remain comfortably dependent. But the independent man breaks the script. He does not answer to committees, trends, or public opinion. He is unpredictable, unbribable, and unshakable. Carl Jung observed this over a century ago. Society despises those who reflect, who examine themselves, who think beyond the herd. The independent man is a mirror to the crowd, a mirror showing the weakness, fear, and superficiality they desperately hide. Most men gossip, judge, and mock him. Wise men study him, trying to understand the clarity and power he has cultivated through solitude. History provides the evidence. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher, whose decisions were guided by reason, reflection, and principle, not the whims of the court. Or Leonardo da Vinci, who often retreated from society, working in solitude, producing visions centuries ahead of his time. They were feared because their freedom exposed the mediocrity of those around them. Weak men fear independence. They fear a man whose value is measured not by approval, but by principle. Every time society tries to shame him for being alone, it is not a reflection of his failure. It is a reflection of their own cowardice. Every attempt to mock or control him is a desperate grasp at preserving their illusion of dominance. The independent man is dangerous because he thinks. While the masses are distracted by trivialities, social media, gossip, shallow ambition, he cultivates knowledge, strength, and clarity. Every choice he makes is deliberate. Every action he takes is aligned with purpose. He does not compromise, he does not settle, and he does not conform. Most men live their lives as though obedience is the highest virtue. The independent man knows the truth. The highest virtue is freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom of spirit. And this terrifies society because it reminds them that they are not truly free. Every great thinker, philosopher, and visionary understood this. The independent man is a threat because he demonstrates that life is not meant to be lived for others, for approval, or for comfort. Life is meant to be mastered. And mastery is only possible when a man steps outside the herd, embraces solitude, and refuses to bend to the expectations of the many. Society hates him because he is unshackled. Society fears him because he embodies truth. And history proves that men who cultivate independence are not merely surviving, they are shaping the future, one decision at a time, Far beyond the understanding of those who fear being alone. Most men believe marriage is the ultimate measure of success. Society sells it as love, security, and purpose. It tells men that to be respected, to be fulfilled, to be complete, they must marry, have children, and dedicate their lives to obligations scripted by others. This is one of the biggest lies most men will ever believe. Nietzsche warned that marriage is often a subtle trap, a breeding ground for compromise, distraction, and stagnation. The man who marries without self-mastery surrenders himself to societal expectation. He sacrifices his time, his freedom, and his clarity to fulfill roles defined by others. Weak men celebrate this as achievement. Wise men see it as surrender. Consider history. Socrates never married. Diogenes mocked conventional family structures. Nietzsche himself lived apart. Understanding that deep thought, philosophical exploration, and personal mastery require freedom from social chains. These men recognized a simple truth. Happiness and purpose cannot be outsourced to someone else, nor can they be found in the validation of family or society. The man who lives alone after 40 has bypassed this trap entirely. He is not bound by obligations dictated by cultural scripts or emotional blackmail. He chooses his life deliberately, rather than letting it be dictated by tradition, expectation, or fear. He is the master of his time, his attention, and his energy. Every decision he makes is an exercise of sovereignty. Most men fail to see why this terrifies society. A man who does not marry, who does not conform to expected family structures, challenges the fundamental lie that dependence on others is necessary for fulfillment. He embodies independence in its rawest form, and societies built on predictability, obedience, and control fear what they cannot regulate. Marriage, family, and expectation are not evil in themselves. They are tools. They can enrich life, provide support, and cultivate virtue. But without self-mastery, they become chains. They distract, dilute, and diminish. A man who chooses to live alone after 40 demonstrates mastery over these forces. He is not lonely, he is free. He does not fear solitude because he has learned to cultivate his own purpose, his own joy, and his own discipline. Every great man who changed the world understood this principle. Solitude, deliberate choice, and rejection of empty societal rituals were central to their greatness. Marcus Aurelius retreated into reflection despite ruling an empire. Leonardo da Vinci worked in isolation to craft genius that would outlive centuries. Nietzsche rejected social convention to think truths that terrified polite society. The modern man, conditioned from childhood to fear solitude and pursue social validation, cannot comprehend this. That is why a man alone after 40 is feared. Not because he has failed, but because he has succeeded where most men are too weak to try. He has refused to surrender his freedom to comfort, tradition, or expectation. This is not about rejecting love or family. It is about refusing chains that diminish your clarity and strength. A man who masters himself, who chooses solitude over submission, and who lives deliberately beyond societal expectation, becomes unstoppable, and that is precisely why society fears him. Solitude is not loneliness. It is power. And the man who understands this wields it like a weapon. Carl Jung called it the path to individuation, the process of becoming the man you are meant to be, free from the illusions and distractions of society. Most men cannot endure it. They fill their days with noise, validation, and trivial pursuits because they fear what they might discover about themselves in silence. Weak men avoid reflection. Wise men embrace it. History is filled with men who turned solitude into strength. Nikola Tesla, confined by obsession and brilliance, produced inventions that reshaped the modern world. Howard Hughes withdrew from society to sharpen his mind, pushing the boundaries of aviation and business. Aristotle cultivated thought in isolation, producing ideas that would guide humanity for millennia. Solitude allowed these men to see clearly, act decisively, and create in ways that were impossible for those chained to social expectation. The man who lives alone after 40 understands that distraction is the enemy of clarity. Social rituals, constant validation, and meaningless conversation dilute focus, weaken discipline, and cloud judgment. In contrast, solitude forces confrontation with reality. It exposes weaknesses, illuminates truths, and demands mastery over one's mind, body, and spirit. Every choice becomes deliberate, every action intentional, every thought sharpened by reflection. Most men mistake busyness for purpose. They mistake social approval for achievement. The man who lives alone knows better. He has turned the very thing society fears, his isolation, into a tool of power. He does not depend on the herd for identity. He does not measure himself by the approval of others. In solitude, he cultivates independence, self-reliance, and clarity that the crowd cannot understand. Jung warned that the collective unconscious fears the autonomous individual. A man alone, self-sufficient and disciplined, is unpredictable. He cannot be swayed by social pressure, manipulated by approval, or controlled by obligation. This is why societies, corporations, and even families attempt to shame, distract, or isolate such men. But they fail. The man who has embraced solitude has mastered the hardest battlefield of all, himself. Solitude also amplifies creativity, wisdom, and courage. It allows a man to act without compromise, to think without influence, and to live without apology. Weak men fear solitude because it exposes mediocrity. Strong men pursue it because it sharpens greatness. Every great thinker, inventor, and leader understood this. Every philosopher who spoke truth, every conqueror who reshaped history, first mastered the art of being alone. And this is the secret most men never learn. Solitude is not a punishment. It is a weapon. Used wisely, it makes a man dangerous to the ordinary, unstoppable in his pursuits and untouchable in his integrity. Every man who chooses to live alone after 40 has realized this truth. And that is why society fears him, not his weakness but his power. In today's world, solitude is more radical than ever. We live in an era of constant connection, distraction, and surveillance. Social media demands attention, curated lives sell validation, and society pushes men to measure themselves by likes, followers, and empty approval. Most men sacrifice clarity, strength, and independence to maintain this illusion. But the man who lives alone after 40 rejects all of it. He reads, he thinks, he plans, he acts. He does not live to please strangers or chase validation from the crowd. While the masses scroll endlessly, he cultivates understanding. While weak men drown in comparison, he sharpens his mind and his purpose. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, outside the influence of collective expectation. Today, this process is not just rare, it is revolutionary. Society fears him because he exposes mediocrity. The world of constant chatter, superficial connection, and curated approval cannot stand someone who lives deliberately, acts independently, and thinks critically. He holds a mirror to everyone trapped in distraction, showing them their weakness, their compromise, and their fear. Every post, every trend, every social ritual becomes irrelevant to him. He has stepped outside the matrix that most men mistake for reality. This is why the independent man is a threat to modern society. Not because he is malicious, but because he is free. He does not seek comfort in numbers. He does not measure success by comparison. And he does not compromise his mind or morals for acceptance. In a world obsessed with conformity, he is the anomaly, the variable they cannot control, the man who proves that true freedom is possible. History proves it again and again. Every visionary, whether philosopher, inventor, or leader, spent time apart from the herd. In isolation, they saw clearly. They acted decisively. They created realities the majority could not comprehend. Today, the man who lives alone after 40 does the same. He cultivates mastery of his own life, strength of character, and clarity of mind. Most men fear solitude because it demands responsibility, courage, and self-awareness. The man who embraces it understands the truth. Distraction is the enemy, conformity is the prison, and independence is power. To reject the noise of modern life, to live deliberately and alone, is not a weakness. It is a declaration of sovereignty. It terrifies the world because it reveals the lies that most men cling to. Masculinity is not measured by approval, comfort, or conformity. It is measured by sovereignty, by the courage to live deliberately, act decisively, and think independently. Weak men seek permission. Strong men take responsibility. The man who lives alone after 40 embodies the highest form of masculine power. He does not answer to the crowd. He answers only to truth, principle, and himself. Every choice he makes is deliberate. Every action is aligned with purpose. He does not bend to expectation, nor does he chase approval. Ancient Stoics understood this. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. They taught that a man must cultivate inner freedom before he can act in the world. They understood that true masculinity requires mastery over the mind, discipline over the body, and clarity over desire. Most men confuse busyness with purpose, comfort with achievement, and popularity with power. The independent man knows better. He cultivates his body, sharpens his mind, and refines his spirit in solitude. He confronts fear, wrestles with truth, and refuses to compromise his principles for temporary ease. This is the path that society fears because it cannot be sold, controlled, or diluted. History confirms this pattern. Every great man, from warriors to philosophers, lived by these principles. Alexander the Great, though surrounded by armies, spent long hours in reflection and strategy. Leonardo da Vinci often withdrew from society, honing his vision far ahead of his peers. Nietzsche, untethered from social convention, wrote truths that shook polite society to its core. These men understood that mastery begins alone, and that power is cultivated through independence, not dependence. The modern man who seeks true masculinity must embrace this path. He must reject validation, confront fear, and step into solitude without apology. He must act according to principle, not approval. Weak men will ridicule, dismiss, or envy him. Wise men will study him, learn from him, and recognize the courage it takes to live deliberately. Masculinity is not inherited, purchased, or granted. It is claimed. It is forged through responsibility, discipline, and self-mastery. The man who lives alone after 40 claims it fully. He becomes unshakable, untouchable, and unstoppable. And this is why society fears him, admires him secretly, and misunderstands him openly. Most men fear loneliness, but the truth is far deeper. They fear freedom. Freedom demands responsibility, courage, and absolute honesty with oneself. The man who lives alone after 40 has stared this fear in the face and triumphed. He does not cling to comfort. He does not seek approval. He does not hide behind social distractions. He confronts reality directly, and in doing so he becomes untouchable. Society fears him because he exposes its own weakness. The world of shallow validation, constant distraction, and hollow conformity cannot stand a man who refuses to compromise, who refuses to bow to expectation, and who refuses to fear solitude. Every choice he makes is deliberate. Every action aligns with his principle.
He acts from sovereignty, not obligation. This is why the man alone is dangerous, not because he seeks conflict, but because he cannot be controlled.
Every word, every move, every thought is his own. Weak men gossip, mock, and judge. Strong men study him. Every society has feared its independent men, philosophers, inventors, warriors, and visionaries who refuse to obey the herd. Their power came not from numbers, wealth, or influence, but from mastery over themselves. Confronting fear is not optional. It is mandatory for the man who seeks truth, mastery, and freedom. Loneliness is a test, solitude is a tool, and reflection is the forge of greatness. Every man who has mastered himself, Jung, Nietzsche, Marcus Aurelius, Diogenes, understood that the ultimate battlefield exists within. To survive and thrive in the world, a man must first survive and thrive in his own mind. And so the man who lives alone after 40 stands as both a warning and a challenge. He shows that freedom is possible, that strength is cultivated, and that life can be lived deliberately rather than dictated. He confronts fear not by avoiding it, but by fully embracing it. And in doing so, he becomes more than independent. He becomes sovereign. The man who lives alone after 40 is the ultimate paradox, feared by society, revered by history, and free beyond measure. To live alone is not failure, it is mastery. To reject conformity is not arrogance, it is truth. To embrace solitude is not isolation, it is power. Carl Jung understood this. The Stoics understood this. Every great man who shaped history understood this. Solitude is not emptiness, it is the crucible of clarity. Independence is not weakness, it is the foundation of sovereignty. And freedom is not granted. It is claimed by those brave enough to confront fear, reject approval, and act deliberately. Society will never understand him. The masses fear what they cannot control. They ridicule what they cannot replicate. But the man alone after 40 does not seek their understanding, approval, or validation. His life is his own. Every decision, every thought, every action belongs to him alone. And in this sovereignty lies the ultimate power. A power that the dependent, the distracted, and the fearful will never know. This is your choice. You can continue to live for approval, comfort, and illusion, wandering through life like the obedient majority, or you can step into solitude, confront your own reality, and embrace the independence that most men fear. To live deliberately, to master yourself, and to refuse to bow to expectation is the path to true greatness. The man who dares to live alone after 40 is not a man lost. He is a man found, a man complete, a man sovereign. And the world cannot stand it.